Bond, it's Moneypenny. I've got your phone. Will you do me a favour next time? Go and pick it up yourself.
If you're as terminally online a Bond fan as I am, you'll be used to a certain number of recurring fan ideas for future Bond films and spin-offs. You know, like setting the film series in the 1950s, bringing back either Pierce Brosnan or Timothy Dalton, or even both for one final old man Bond outing, readapting the Ian Fleming novels in chronological order, and a spin-off streaming series centred around Miss Moneypenny.
What gives?
Me, given an ounce of encouragement.
Anyway, turns out the people posting these kinds of ideas on forums and Reddit and such are qualified to be Amazon content executives, because in a recent article from The Hollywood Reporter, apparently a Moneypenny series was indeed one of the ideas being floated before it was promptly rejected by Eon Productions. Sources close to the franchise say the streamer approached the Broccolis with pitches for a TV series based on Moneypenny, the MI6 secretary who's been batting eyes at Bond since Sean Connery's days, as well as a show about Bond CIA buddy Felix Leiter, and maybe even something involving a female 007. Predictably, Broccoli and Wilson weren't interested.
Officially, that was never confirmed.
Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. Now that Eon Productions are relinquishing creative control of 007 to Amazon, it's reasonable to assume that these spin-off ideas and more are back on the table. While I think that first and foremost for Amazon is going to be getting their own James Bond film series off the ground, a Moneypenny spin-off to me does feel like the most logical next step for them to take if they are going to look to try to milk the Bond brand for streaming services and beyond. Moneypenny has been a character in these movies since the very beginning. While never being a huge part of the Ian Fleming novels, the Bond Moneypenny flirting scenes quickly became a staple of the films and something audiences looked forward to seeing, despite only ever really amounting to a handful of lines and a minute or so of screen time per film. Heck, there are a couple of films where Moneypenny doesn't even get so much as a close-up, but damn it, she's still there. Barring Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, the character has appeared in every single other Bond film, second only to James Bond and M, who are joint first for series appearances, which makes sense, I guess. I mean, it would be weird to have a James Bond film without James Bond in it, but hey, if Moneypenny were to take the lead in a series, I guess we'd have a James Bond series without James Bond in it, so it's something we should maybe get used to. But what would a Moneypenny series even look like? Presumably it's not going to be a woman sat at a desk and refilling the stationery cupboard for 1 hour episodes of a 10-part series. Well, fortunately, we do already have some ideas as to what it might look like, because believe it or not, James Bond has a long and rich history with television and spin-offs, including a 1-hour TV special that featured Moneypenny as its lead. I'm talking, of course, about Welcome to Japan, Mr. Bond, a TV special produced to promote the then upcoming release of You Only Live Twice, while the special essentially operates as a veritable James Bond clip show and features a weird subplot involving some unseen woman lusting after James Bond in front of a cuckolded boyfriend. Aside from that, the special is really all about Lois Maxwell's Miss Moneypenny.
James getting married? I wonder who it could be.
You can see the whole special on the 2-disc DVD and the Blu-ray edition of You Only Live Twice, and it's one of my favourite extra features to be included on any of these discs, purely, really, for the Moneypenny scenes. I mean, it's really cool and quite novel to see what Moneypenny was getting up to while Bond was away, which, in this case, is mainly centred around musing about Bond and coping with her bitchy co-worker played by Kate O'Mara.
Poor girl. Looks like there's no hope for you now. What do you mean there's no hope for me now? Well, haven't you heard? Your lover boy's getting married.
Turns out British intelligence wasn't so busy that she couldn't flounce off to Q Branch to hang out with Major Boothroyd too. As I say, this was constructed as a clip show, and as such a lot of the character dialogue is there to set up clips.
Strange girl, Domino. Every time James opened his mouth, she put her foot in it.
So it's not as if the thing works as like a pilot for what a 1960s produced Moneypenny series would have looked like, but I do think it proves on some tenuous level that, well, okay, I guess this character can be on screen for more than just a couple of minutes and without a James Bond present, and she can hold some kind of a narrative together, even if that narrative is largely centered around just pining for 007. As such, I don't think we're about to get a remake of Welcome to Japan, Mr. Bond anytime soon. Much more likely a source of inspiration for a Moneypenny series, I think, is the Moneypenny Diaries, which according to the tabloids is already in the process of being adapted. So this is a weird one and definitely a sign to Bond fans to keep their guards up when it comes to rumours and clickbait surrounding announcements of future Bond projects. So I feel like the whole Moneypenny spin-off conversation really started to get going when The Sun, bastion of journalistic integrity that they are, published an article saying that Florence Pugh was poised to play Miss Moneypenny in a spin-off series titled The Moneypenny Diaries. Diaries. For the time being, at least, I think that this is complete nonsense, and to misquote James Bond, creative control changes, but the clickbait remains the same, is how I'd categorize it. But the Moneypenny Diaries do exist. They are a trilogy of novels published between 2005 and 2008, written by Samantha Weinberg, and they are set in the 50s and 60s and take place in between Bond's missions as we know them from Ian Fleming's novels. I have to admit, in my big Bond read-through, I am yet to reach the Moneypenny Diaries, and considering how much second-hand copies of these things go for on eBay, I may be holding out for a reprint, but from what I know of the synopses, yeah, I could imagine a Moneypenny TV series operating on the basis of these. I mean, you know, okay, while Bond is away doing something, Moneypenny has her own adventures doing something else, providing support for other agents and uncovering her own plots and what have you. What I do have a hard time imagining, though, is that Amazon would want to set such a series back in the 1950s or 60s, unless, of course, they do decide to set the main Bond film series back then, but I think they're probably going to want to reimagine Moneypenny in a more modern context. So honestly, I think that the blueprint for what a Moneypenny spin-off could look like already exists within the film series itself, and we need look no further than Naomi Harris.
Oh. Well, my name's Eve. Eve Moneypenny.
Prior to Harris's casting in the role, Moneypenny was almost entirely desk-bound. In some films, she doesn't even get to stand up, and when she did get to leave the office, it was usually to join M in a different briefing location, or in A View to a Kill's case, she did get to go to the races, dressed up like something you'd find in a pick-and-mix section of a sweet shop. But the character's main purpose was to provide a little bit of flirting with James Bond before he went off on his mission, usually providing a couple of funny lines. Naomi Harris's casting changed everything, and it's actually a surprise reveal at the end of Skyfall that the rookie agent Bond was paired with earlier in the film, the one who shot him in the shoulder, thus thwarting the whole MI6 mission in Istanbul and ultimately setting off the chain of events that would lead to multiple casualties and deaths, including that of her own boss. Maybe she's actually the true villain of Skyfall? Anyway, yes, that rookie turned out to be none other than Eve Moneypenny, and not unreasonably, as a result of friendly firing MI6's top agent, she is removed from fieldwork and given a desk job. Though this certainly didn't stop the character from getting out and about in the films that followed. In Spectre, she's part of the MI6 gang, involved in some of the action during the climax, and in No Time to Die, she's instrumental in aiding Bond during some of his London-based scenes, which do take her away from the MI6 office. I imagine something like her appearances in Skyfall and Spectre would be what Amazon executives would have in mind when it comes to envisioning the character as a lead of a series, and the adventures that she'd go on. It's certainly what marketers had in mind anyway. Naomi Harris featured in an ad for the Sony Xperia Z5 back in 2015, so around the time of Spectre's release. Naomi Harris's portrayal has undoubtedly shifted the Moneypenny character into a different space. She is now a character who can immerse herself in the action, and Harris is a super talented actress, entirely believable in these scenarios, and as much as I would love to see her more as Miss Moneypenny, I have a feeling that any potential spin-off would look to recast the actress while probably using her portrayal as a blueprint moving forward. Heck, bring back Harris as an older Moneypenny and have her mentor the new one. For the sake of Harris's return, I think I'd tolerate a Moneypenny codename theory being canonized. I think the main challenge for whoever decides to take on making such a series would be to make Moneypenny a much more active character in stories. In the films, of course, everything that she does is related to Bond and his story, because that's her role. She's a side character and he's the main character, but of course, if she were leading her own show, she as a character needs to be leading the charge on her own missions and what have you, and I think the main criticism Amazon would have to overcome with this would be, well, frankly, who cares what Miss Moneypenny is up to when we all know that James Bond is off somewhere having a far more interesting adventure? And my answer to that would be, is anyone else here watching Slow Horses? Slow Horses is an Apple TV show starring Gary Oldman, Kristen Scott Thomas, and the occasional tabloid next Bond candidate Jack Lowden, and it's probably my favourite show currently in production right now. It's funny, it's exciting, it has some great performances. Honestly, I highly recommend it if you want a really great spy show to sink your teeth into. Anyway, how this all relates to Moneypenny in my mind is that Slow Horses is a show about a bunch of spy rejects, basically. If you mess up at MI5, but not quite enough to get fired, you end up in Slough House, which is where this bunch of misfits all find each other. Most of them got into espionage because, you know, they wanted to be James Bond, but they screwed up and now they're expected to do all of the boring stuff that the best agents would never lower themselves to do. That's the premise, but of course through happenstance and initiative and what have you, the main characters get involved in much grander plots, and there's scheming around MI5, they have their own infighting to deal with, as well as with external villains, and I think that's That series would make a great kind of yardstick for what a potential Moneypenny series could look like, or perhaps even more broadly, a Bond spin-off series centered around more characters at MI6. A way to broaden out the premise could well be to not just focus solely on Moneypenny herself, but also get other known quantities at MI6 involved. Q&M as staples that would presumably be a part of a working Moneypenny's life anyway, but hey, we can even bring back Miss Penelope Smallbone from Octopussy, flesh out her motives and backstory a bit. I always wondered why we never got to see her again in the series. Bring her back as a double agent working for Spectre, damn it, I knew she always had evil in those eyes. Casting would also have to be a major consideration, and frankly, why I don't think we'll be hearing anything about a potential Moneypenny series until Amazon gets some ways along the production of Bond 26. I suspect the question for any spin-off related to Bond now will be, is it set in the same timeline as the films? So, do you hope to cast a Moneypenny in Bond 26 and then tie that same actress into a contract to also appear in a series? Or do you do kind of what like DC do with a bunch of their projects and just say, okay, these are separate universes and you can cast different people in the roles depending on whether it's for the films or the TV series? I think my preference would be for the latter, so that any series wouldn't feel like it was tied to the film series, and it just feels like that would be too limiting for creative options. It would also help avoid the pitfall of having the series become too reliant on events from the films and vice versa to ultimately create homework viewing. Like, I do kind of just want the Bond films to continue to exist on their own, and I don't want to have to rely on watching an entire season of a TV show to fill in narrative gaps, or even just smaller details. I'd just kind of prefer the things to remain separate, like church and state, if you will. Just to sort of change the topic slightly as I come to the end of the video, I've spent much of this obviously talking about what a Moneypenny series potentially could look like, but perhaps the bigger question I think we should be asking ourselves is, does anybody actually really want a Moneypenny series? Maybe Barbara and Michael were doing us all a favour holding back on greenlighting such concepts as this, and only time will tell, of course, but if done right and avoiding some of the more eye-rolling pitfalls, I think some kind of a Moneypenny, or more broadly an MI6 00 section series using characters and elements from the James Bond world, I think it could work. I'm looking at shows like Slow Horses, which I really love, and I've also seen Amazon's own Jack Ryan series, which is an espionage show, of course, and I very much enjoyed that. So good spy shows are being made, and Bond is the most recognizable spy in the world, so it would make a business sense, at least, to translate that world to the small screen in some way. The danger with these things is always going to be the risk of franchise oversaturation, and also, frankly, whether the general public are even going to be remotely interested in a Bond spin-off not featuring James Bond. I mean, the limited track record we have to look at ain't great, even though I'll always have a special place in my heart for you, James Bond Jr. This is ultimately why I think a Moneypenny series is more likely than a Felix Leiter series. I mean, if you're gonna spin off from Bond, you presumably want to do it with the most recognizable names possible, and I just don't think that Felix Leiter as a character is as much in the general public consciousness as the likes of Moneypenny, M and Q. Plus, with the focus on MI6, the 00 section, you get to keep a sense of Bond's inherent Britishness about the whole thing, which I don't know if a CIA-centric series would feel as of the same piece. That's not to say it wouldn't be good. As I say, I very much enjoyed the Jack Ryan Amazon series, and he's a CIA agent, but unless Amazon cast an amazing new Felix Leiter in their film series, and audiences are clamoring for more of that actor in the role, I can't see a Felix spin-off happening anytime in the near future. As I say, I think Moneypenny is the more likely candidate, but I think we're still a ways off from it becoming a reality, which is probably a good thing for me, as it gives me time to get to the Moneypenny Diaries, as well as the Dynamite comic, which also featured a Moneypenny-centric adventure. Jesus, I mean, TV, books, comics, advertising, maybe Moneypenny's already had her fair share of spin-offs. Give someone else a turn. How about a Bill Tanner spin-off, folks? As always, please do let me know your own thoughts in the comments section below. Are you someone who has been hankering for a Moneypenny series for years now, and you see this as like, oh, finally it could actually be within reach? Or are you someone who is absolutely not interested whatsoever in any potential Bond spin-offs, and the focus should be totally on the films? Please do let me know in the comments. Also below are links to my various social medias, as well as the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button, so do click those if you want to stay up to date on future video uploads. And with all that said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.